On this episode of The Ethics Experts, we got Reid Blackman. This guy is super smart. We talk about AI, generative AI. We talk about his book, Ethical Machines. We even incorporate some art discussion, some philosophy discussion, the ethics of layoffs, how to use AI, and what to look out for when you're building your ethical AI policy. Hope you enjoy.
Welcome to The Ethics Experts, where we're elevating ethics and compliance and HR to the strategic level it's supposed to be.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Ethics Experts. If it's your first time joining us, welcome. And if you're a returning subscriber, hey friend, hope you're having a great day. You see what happens when you subscribe to the Ethics Experts? You get a bonus greeting on every single episode. So hit that subscribe button as we change the world by fixing our workplaces. I got a treat for you. Every week I say this, but I really mean it this time. I got my man Reid Blackman here. He is the founder and CEO of Virtue. It's an AI ethical risk consultancy, and he wrote this really cool book called Ethical Machines, which was published by Harvard Business Review. He's been on the Ethics Verse. We had a really cool session talking about the ethics of AI, and we're going to kind of dive into that some more today. He's he's somebody that I've stolen a lot of talk tracks from and learned a lot from. So hoping to get some more so I can continue to hopefully sound smart as I talk to other people. What's going on, Reid?
How's it going?
Good,
Glad
man.
you give you something to steal.
So what's been going on since last time we talked? Your book has been out. I know you've been on some more podcasts and some more webinars and stuff like that. What have you been, what's happening in the world of AI, and how has what you've talked about in your book continued, how have you continued to see that in the marketplace?
Yeah, I mean, it's growing. The level of anxiety has grown quite a bit, probably since last we spoke. I don't remember. I think it was before GPT.
It was.
Is that right? Or have I made that up? Yeah.
Or like GPT was just kind of starting.
Right. So it wasn't. So now, things have really heated up. I have a lot of clients who have gotten very worked up about generative AI. So for what I'm seeing in the marketplace with clients, things like that, is that they're building what I call an AI ethical risk program, what more corporate people would call a responsible AI program. And they're really leading the development of that program with a focus on what do we need to do within the next 3 to 6 months around generative AI. I had one client say something that has really stuck with me, Fortune 500 company, and she said, we don't have any fires going on right now, but everyone's holding a flamethrower. And so we need to do something about that.
That's a pretty good analogy.
So that's sort of a nice way of, I think, capturing sort of the state of play now with, mostly enterprise, Fortune 500 clients.
Yeah. What do you think about like what's going on in Italy where they've essentially like outlawed it? Like, do you think that's a sustainable, just what's your kind of opinion of that?
I haven't followed it that closely. I mean, I was well aware of it when Italy first banned GPT over privacy and cybersecurity concerns. Like there was leaking up chats to other people. They leaked payment information, and then there was concerns around the IP that was used to train ChatGPT. They banned it. They gave OpenAI 30 days. I'm pretty sure OpenAI complied with all that. I believe that the ban has been lifted. I was really surprised by that. I thought that was sort of arguably too big of a move. So look, one thing that everyone is paying attention to in the world of AI is the EU's AI Act. So that's the regulation that's coming out of the EU that should, in an ideal world, dictate how companies will govern their AI, so roughly something like that. And they do have a category of banned AI, certain kinds of banned AI, and it was more like social credit risk scores, stuff like that. Social credit scores, but GPT doesn't rise to that level,
right?
So I can understand putting them under investigation, looking at them with a magnifying glass, requesting certain kinds of materials, et cetera. The move to ban it right out of the gate was surprising to me because it doesn't seem like it meets that level of should be banned. Even if the act had passed by now, which it hasn't, it still wouldn't reach that level. Yeah.
It seems like I don't know what the like analogy is historically, but it's just like, well, we're just not even going to mess with it at all. When you're talking about when you're talking to your Fortune 500 clients who are talking about everybody has a flamethrower and we don't have a fire yet, how are you kind of advising them about how to kind of navigate through this in terms of, I presume policy creation, responsible AI use in the organization? Is it an education thing? Is it a controls thing? Is it a mix of both? Like how are folks kind of like surfing this wave?
Yeah, so I'd say the work we do with those clients falls into four buckets, one of four buckets. One is something like an assessment of where you are now. So some of them, when they come to us, they already have something like a responsible AI program or an AI ethics program. It's sort of early stages-ish, or they have nothing at all. And then we do an assessment and we say, okay, here's where we see the biggest gaps. Here's where you see red, yellow, green. Here's the kinds of things that you should really prioritize. So that's one bucket that a lot of them come to us with. They want to know, where do we stand right now? Are we cutting edge? Are we way behind? Are we sort of middle of the pack? And what are the biggest risks that we face? So assessment is a big thing. Learning and development is a big thing. What's really interesting about L&D is that used to sort of come more towards the end, where we build an AI ethical risk program, a responsible AI program, and then you want to educate your people on the nature of the program, what they need to know in their capacity, given the role that they occupy, whether they're a data scientist or an HR or marketing or in cyber or legal, whatever. But what's happened with generative AI is that education component has been moved to the front because they have access to it now. Before it was like, when we talked about democratizing AI, we talked about non-data scientists using some tools to create models that were still relatively technical, that you'd probably have some data scientist working with you and building it, something like that, because the non-data scientist knows the business problem. They have some training or other around or access to low code or no code AI tools. But now with generative AI, particularly GPT 4.0 as found in Bing or Bard, for instance. I mean, GPT is not in Bard, but GPT as found in Bing, Bard, any large language model. It's just everyone's got access to it. Anyone can use it. It's not a tool to build a model. It's just using an AI tool right out of the box, so to speak. So educating people about what the risks are has become prioritized relative to where it was before. And then the other two kinds of things that we do is building that, which you can call AI ethical risk infrastructure, the kinds of things that you were talking about. What does governance look like? Policies, procedures, workflows, tools, metrics, KPIs, QA, QI, that sort of stuff. And then the final bucket of things is integrating it throughout the enterprise. So, you're a Fortune 5, you're a multinational company, you have enterprise risk categories, but you have the way that data scientists are doing their thing. You've got ESG department, and you have sustainability, and you want to the best you can, at least this is what we recommend to clients, you want to integrate how you design and track and improve that program in a way that's commensurate with how you design, track ESG, sustainability, et cetera. So you're harmonizing everything. So your AI ethics program can play nicely in a dashboard that is showing metrics and KPIs around ESG, sustainability, operational metrics, business metrics, et cetera.
Yeah, just so it doesn't get kind of siloed, but that the same sort of like mental whatever frameworks are consistently applied across these different areas.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it is kind of nuts, right? Because last time we talked, since we talked last time, there's just been this massive explosion and like everybody's using this. It was interesting to see sort of that like fall off. I'm sure you've seen the graph of like ChatGPT usage, how it came and sort of it kind of fell off a little bit. And that's probably, I think due to just people kind of dipping their toe in and being like, cool, but not really nerding out on it. But then you still have those sort of like core group of like early adopters who are just using it for everything. And I've seen this huge separate, like the percentage of people in my team that have used it is probably 80%, but then there's that core group of probably 30 or 40% that are using it for all kinds of stuff to like create more leverage in their work. Yeah,
I'm generally unimpressed by this. It's trended down. They have fewer users. That's too short-sighted a way of looking at things.
Yep.
So for one, you do still have those even if it's, let's say it's 10% of employees. Okay, but if you've got 100,000 employees, that's 10,000 employees messing around with something. So that's pretty significant, I would say. So that's one thing to mention. Another thing to mention is that those people who used it and then stopped using it because they couldn't really figure out how to use it for their purposes, which doesn't mean that they won't learn or figure it out, won't be told by one of those early users, those people who figure it out, the 10% who stay on, figure things out, and then tell those colleagues who gave up on it 3 months ago, hey, did you know that you could use it for this?
Right.
And then, so there's going to be, education around it by peers, peer-to-peer education about here's things that you can use it for. So that's another factor that matters. Another factor that matters is that there are loads of developers, companies consultancies, take your McKinsey, Deloitte, EY, BCG, whatever, all of those massive consultancies, Accenture, they're building these products for their clients, right? They're taking an LLM or a Midjourney, whatever, and they're refining them in various ways to be appropriate for, they hope, their clients. So I want to see next to that graph of individuals' decline in use, I want to see that next to, a graph that represents the money that companies are pouring into this. I want to see a graph that shows how many LLM products companies are pitching to clients. Vendors are pitching to potential clients. I suspect that the graph goes the opposite way.
Yeah, absolutely goes the opposite way. It's totally parabolic, 100%. I mean, there's just so much going on, and it's like I can't even keep up with it. I follow some people on Twitter who are like these Midjourney experts, and like the stuff that they're ripping out is just absolutely wild. I mean, it's nuts. Yeah. They're like dialing in these prompts, and I follow this one guy who's just been documenting over the last several months like his Midjourney journey, and I mean, I almost can't think about like I can't even think of like a group or a job that is not like at least at some level threatened by this. Like models are threatened for sure. Writers are absolutely threatened for sure.
Yeah.
Like
writers of derivative garbage are definitely threatened.
Well,
which is probably most writers.
well, I'm glad you said that because I saw during this writer strike that someone was saying I'm really concerned about like the plagiarism that is going to be coming out of the use of these tools to write to write screenplays or whatever. And I saw an ad I saw an article, and by article of course I mean tweet, about a job post for Netflix to be like an AI like writer, and it was like for 190 grand or something, and it was making the point that the average actor is only making like 26 grand or something like that. But it's funny when you think about that, like concern for plagiarism, when you see what Hollywood has ripped out over the last 10 years. It's all remakes and toy based things, and all those things are at some level derivatives. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I mean, look, there's something can be inspired by without being derivative, but everyone knows there's lots of garbage. I mean, you can't have all these content platforms and not, you got a pipeline to fill. You got to come up with new stuff. You can't just have, the same show on the featured, bar. It's got to change like, every few days. But, that means you got to feed the beast. And if you're going to feed the beast and speed matters, then quality is probably going to go down.
Yeah. I mean, and it kind of, introduces this question of like, are those pictures that guy is generating, or like is something that you make with Midjourney, is that art? Do you own that? And I would kind of argue that it is. What'd you say?
Yeah, potentially. I mean, there's this, and I was a philosophy professor for 10 years. My PhD is in philosophy. I'm down to do philosophy 100%. That said, the question is it art? Is a philosophical question that I think in some sense doesn't matter. What's going to matter is whether we categorize it as art or not. I think what's going to matter is something like, does this person deserve compensation for what they've done? Do they deserve praise for what they've done? Okay. Do they, what sort of attitude should we have towards the person who created this using generative AI? And that question seems to me more, in some ways, more interesting and more pressing than the, if you like, academic question. Not uninteresting, but academic. Is it art? Well, call it what the hell you want. The question is, did this person just type in like, draw me picture in the style of so-and-so that looks like this, and then they hit enter and then they published it? You might be like, well, that doesn't impress us. But if they took it as a sort of, they did that, took that as their raw material, their canvas, so to speak, was in blank. It was generated by, the canvas has some content generated by AI, by their prompt. And then they do some stuff with that. Well, then what did they do with it? Was it impressive or not impressive? When Andy Warhol took existing imagery and did something with it, do we think that what he did with it was impressive, interesting, cool, aesthetically valuable? Or do we think it's, that was stupid, he didn't do anything? And then we can have, loads of debates about that. But I think it's, the question is, what attitudes should we have towards the people who use AI in these ways to produce whatever they produce, something like that.
Yeah, I get that distinction, and I think you're right. The first question was a little bit philosophical and like kind of who cares. But
I'm down with it. Like I said, no, who cares? But I don't think it needs to be question number one when people are talking about generative AI? Like, is it art?
Yeah, and I just kind of love that whole debate of like, if it's art, I think it's art. Art's in the eye of the beholder, and if you think it's cool and it moves you, then it could be art, and it could be someone defecating on a canvas or something. Maybe that could be art.
I wouldn't go that far. See, now we're getting into the philosophical debate. I don't think that's right. I mean, I just think people can be deceived or confused that something is art when it's not.
I went to a modern art museum once, and there was this like, it must have been 20-yard installation. And the installation was literally against the wall, a single thread or a red yarn that ran all the way across the wall, and about 95% across this area. It just dropped straight down at a right angle. And then there was a pile of maybe 20 feet of yarn below it.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, this guy, I was like, yeah, I mean, that's kind of cool. But I just felt like this guy had an installation due tomorrow. And he's like, what the hell am I going to do?
I mean, so I'm sort of on the same page as you, kind of like, I feel like there's something I'm missing. Here's the thing about art. Art is tricky because, look, it requires some degree of expertise. So like, it's not, there's sensitivity to certain facts or certain aspects of the thing that you might not, I say you, I mean me included, might not be sensitive to. Like, oh, they're doing something. Mm-hmm. We don't see what they're doing because we don't know the art historical context in which it's been done. We don't get it, that it's part of a conversation. And it's the conversation that looks to, like, my children will hear me talking about ethicsy stuff, or they see me on TV and they're like, I don't get it. It's stupid. It's boring. Now, they might be right, but part of me wants to say, well, you just don't get it. You're like kids, you're 8, you don't get that world yet. And so with the red yarn thing, I know we've sort of strayed far from the AI thing, but with art, when you reach a certain level, if you're not sort of sufficiently familiar with what's going on in that world, it's going to look stupid and boring and irrelevant. And so when I see these pieces of yarn thumbtacked to my gut reaction is, this is so stupid. This is dumb.
Right.
This is not art. And then I just sort of think, okay, well, maybe my reaction is trading on my own ignorance of the facts. And I just don't know. Yeah. That said, I don't enjoy it.
Yeah. I have a buddy, and he just like loves death metal. And I was always like, I could never wrap my head around it. That's not any kind of music that I ever, listen to. And, I really kind of sat down with him and like kind of picked his brain. I was like, what do you, I don't get this. Like, obviously, like there's some ignorance in me that I can't appreciate this. And then he started breaking it down to me. He's like, this is like the most technical music. And here's my favorite band. And this guy came up as like, he was doing, I don't know, whatever the hardest music was, symphony music or like, whatever. He ended up kind of growing into this because it was so technical. And I was like, okay, like that's just something that I was kind of deaf to, you know what I'm saying? And I think a lot of that, to your point, is in there. On the other hand, like at some level, I kind of don't care if it's art or not. Like there's this one documentary called Exit Through the Gift Shop. Have you seen that? It's about Banksy.
Yeah, I have. Yeah.
And so like the bad guy in that was this guy called Mr. Brainwash. And he basically figured out a way to mass produce all this like Banksy stuff. And like it was this whole debate. I was debating with like this other friend. I'm like, well, that's not art because he's just like mass producing. And it's like, well, I don't know. All the art that like we see today from the Renaissance and all that, those were all commissions. Like guys were getting paid for that. And if he figured out a way to mass produce it, like, is it necessarily not art because he just was directing these people? I don't know,
Yeah, I know there's a sort of a familiar kind of example in the world of philosophy of art where you take, well, for one, you just get people's intuitions about the difference between a real Rembrandt and one that was painted last night by it's a forgery by a forger. Yeah. And I think usually people think, oh no, the Rembrandt, the real one is the aesthetically valuable one, even though it's indistinguishable because the forger does such a great job. Still, it's a fake, and the other one is real, and there's value in that. So that's one kind of example. Another kind of example is you're walking, someone is walking in a room with a bunch of paint cans. They trip, they knock over a bunch of paint cans. It spills onto the canvas. It looks indistinguishable from a Jackson Pollock. Is it as valuable, as aesthetically interesting, et cetera, as a Jackson Pollock piece? And I think most people think no. And then the question is why? And one I think popular theory in the philosophy of art is that because in order for the work to have its meaning, it has to be directly linked to something like the mental attitudes of the psychology of the creator in some kind of quasi-intentional way. Even if they're expressing their subconscious emotions, it's still somehow expressive of them in some way or other. And spilled paint cans lack that connection to a mental state. To a
there's no intention behind it. They weren't necessarily trying to create that, which is just kind of an interesting, maybe meaningless distinction at some level, right?
Well, again, a lot of people put a lot of value in, it's actually painted by Picasso versus it's not painted by Picasso. It's a forgery.
Yeah, which is.
And so you might think, I'll try to bring it back to AI stuff. Yeah. And so you might wonder, do we, I was talking to a friend of mine who's an artist. I actually did a podcast with him. I have a podcast called Ethical Machines where we talked about exactly this. And, he said, this is, one of the things helps to do is to test how much we really care about process when it comes to the generation of art.
Right.
Do we really value the process, or is it just the outcome?
Yeah, and which kind of leads to this kind of question about like the performative nature of art. Like, is it just the performance itself, or is it the sort of the whole story around the performance that allows us, or that gives, that performance like its value? You know what I'm saying?
Right. And look, when you go to an art museum, they don't just hang the things on the wall and that's it.
Right.
There's usually some kind of there's a bit of history about the piece. And next to it, there's a little placard that's giving you the art. Now, I think generally art museums do a terrible job of this because they just go as facts that don't connect. Mm-hmm. I don't think they connect enough dots for us steadily. Like me, I just don't, most of the time, I just don't get it. And I read the placard and I'm like, I still don't get it. And so I think they could do a better job. But I know that they think that understanding the history or the context is crucial to understanding or appreciating what's going on in the piece.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at a Grandma Moses without the background, you might be like, "Oh, whose kid drew that? Whose kid painted that painting?" You know what I mean?
Right.
So somebody yesterday, we had a webinar, and they asked this question, and I thought it was kind of interesting, and it was something like, "How does AI allow for us to like have more meaning and purpose in our work?" And how would you answer that? It doesn't. Okay, interesting.
Why would it? Well, why would it? I mean, look. Okay, look, here's a possibility. This is a standard line that people like to run. AI does the monotonous stuff, and so it frees us from the monotonous stuff so that we have time to do the more creative stuff. I mean, maybe that's true in some cases. I'm sure that it's true in some cases. Frankly, I don't think most people are that creative. They just got like this creative mind bursting with ideas. They're at a job. They're doing the thing. They like the people well enough. The job is good enough. The pay is good enough. It's too much effort to move jobs. It's too risky. They're comfortable. So they find meaning elsewhere. They don't look to work for their meaning. They go to their family. They go to their friends. They go to their hobbies or whatever. I think, I think that people can be really loud about expressing human creativity, and you're reading this stuff, but it's selection bias because the people who are writing that stuff are creative enough to be writing the stuff.
Great point.
they're the creators. Of course, they're like, it's going to free us to do all the creative stuff. I don't think most people are just banging down the door to be creative.
Yeah, that's probably true. And I think, on balance, most people are probably not finding this deep level of fulfillment from their job. To your point, it's just an aspect of their lives. Most people like.
Yeah, I mean, it's. No, sorry. I think it's probably like, I'm not a historian by any means or a sociologist or something like that, but I think it's fair to say that finding meaning in work it's a cultural phenomenon. I mean, you might think, here's a place where you might really find meaning in life for a lot of people in the world. Religion. Mm-hmm. That's where the meaning is. You go to the store, you sell the stuff, and that's fine. That's good. That's important. But it's important as a means to an end. We go to work and we make the money and we sell the things or whatever it is so that we can spend time with our family, go to church, give money to church, donate to charity, blah, 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 whatever. Let's say it's a religious life, whatever that means, a devout life. You're not looking to work necessarily to get your meaning. You're looking somewhere else. And I think that's perfectly fine. You don't have to look. I get tons of meaning, for lack of a better word, out of my work. I mean, I don't think that's, I feel like I'm really lucky. But, I do something that's highly idiosyncratic. It's creative. It speaks to my intellectual interests, blah, 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 blah. But most people don't do that, and that's fine. They don't need to get meaning out of their work. They need to like it well enough. That's I think the bar, as long as they get meaning from somewhere else.
Which is kind of a pretty powerful reframe just to kind of explore that a little bit, because that is kind of like a meme now, right? And I'm perhaps guilty of it as well. Like I want people to come and I want them to bring their whole selves to work and come to a culture where they can be themselves and put
That's
whatever.
crazy. I mean,
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
you can't really bring your whole self to work, right? Like the person that you're with your significant other or your best friend is not the person that you are when you're at work.
Well, that's not even your whole self, though.
It would probably be inappropriate.
That's fine, but also like you're never really your whole self. Unless, I mean, even with your wife, you're not your whole self. With your best friend, there's still pieces of yourself that like you shave off, right?
Yeah, the aspects of your personality you don't express. Sure.
So,
I mean, I think you want to go to work. You don't have to like hide. You don't want to hide things about yourself. You don't have to feel ashamed. You want the absence of shame for certain aspects of yourself. That seems sufficient, as opposed to like.
Not as romantic though. That's not as a romantic thing to say.
I'm not a romantic type. It's like when I talk about AI ethics. I make this distinction between AI for good and AI for not bad. AI for good is about positive social impact using the powerful tool that is AI. AI for not bad is risk mitigation. It's how do you not ethically, reputationally, regulatorily, legally screw up when you're deploying AI, whether you've designed it in-house or whether you've procured it. And that's the frame that I think businesses should prioritize for both ethical and business reasons. And I sort of think the same about a lot of this stuff, like what we're talking about here. It's like, do we really need to bring our whole selves to work? I mean, that's like a bit much, as opposed to, don't come to work feeling ashamed. Don't feel shamed at work. That's enough.
Yeah, but also, I mean, at a different level, I mean that might cut down to a more, I don't know. I mean, there is some like romanticism in that, for lack of a better term, like people want to feel connected to something, I think. People don't want to feel, to your point, ashamed for where they came from or the background that they've had or whatever. Like whatever's going on with their marriage or something. Like they want to, it is one life to some degree. Obviously, we're never bringing our whole selves, I don't think, really anywhere.
Sure. Yeah.
But I as I've been kind of thinking about what you said, I kind of like that frame. Like people shouldn't feel ashamed at work. And, in the same breath, though, I think people shouldn't feel ashamed for not feeling this deep fulfillment from what they're doing. If work to them is only this one sort of aspect of their life, that's fine. If it's sort of good enough and provides enough value to the organization just to get super like economic about it, that there's kind of room for a bunch of, it's kind of a wide spectrum to your point. Yeah.
I'm not prescribing anything. In fact, if anything, I'm sort of I'm the anti-prescriber in this context.
It opens it up a lot.
I wouldn't prescribe. Look, you got to find meaning in your work. No, you don't. If you do, great. If you don't, okay. I hope that you get meaning from somewhere else. But it's not that everything that you do has got to have like this meaning. And work would be a great place because for the simple reason that you spend so much time doing it. So, in terms of how you allot your time, it would be wonderful. It's great if you can find meaning in your work. I just don't think let me put it this way. I don't think it's a necessary condition for living well, for living a good life. I think you can still live a good life, even though your work is sort of like, I like it just fine. It's not where I get my meaning from.
It's something I got to do. It's like cutting the grass. You don't find meaning in cutting the grass or going to the grocery store. And that's fine if you don't bring your whole self to Whole Foods. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Look, again, let's take the comparison to religion. I'm not a religious person, but take the comparison. You tell the religious person, I'll give you $1 million a year if you leave the church or whatever it is. And they're going to say, no, that's not, it's too meaningful.
Right.
I'm not. Go to 99% of people with a job and say, I'm going to give you $1 million a year if you leave your job. How many of them are going to be like, no, my work is too meaningful. I'm not going to take that $1 million a year. I'm like, okay.
It's going to be everybody almost. You're right.
So it's not that meaningful. And I also think probably there's a story that people tell themselves. There's a lot of self-deception. Like, this is really meaningful to me, but they have to tell themselves that because, well, they don't have to, but it's a comforting belief to have. And so people adopt it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
This is great. No, we'll bring it back.
Risk programs in the Fortune 500. Now
we're going everywhere, man. We're not
self-deceived masses.
This podcast is not that prescriptive either. You know what I'm saying? We're going to go where it goes. But I like that framework that you have for. Let's go over that again. AI for I'm gonna butcher it. But AI for not good, or no, AI for good, but also AI for not bad.
Well, so. Yes, AI for good versus AI for not bad. So people talk about AI ethics, and then there's different kinds of people in that space. And some of them are talking about leveraging the power of AI for positive social impact. positive social impact means different things, but often it refers to something like pursuing the United Nations Sustainability Development Goals, the SDGs, something along those lines. That's all good and well. That's not core operations. Right? Core operations is not about positive social impact. It's about making stuff that people will buy, or providing services that people will buy. AI for not bad, that's the phrase that leads my work, is we're going to do what we're going to do from a business perspective. Maybe those goals are ethically good. Maybe those goals are ethically neutral. Let's hope at a bare minimum they're not straight up ethically bad. They're not evil. Given that we're going to pursue those goals, how do we do it in a way that's on the ethical up and up?
Right.
How do we do it in a way that's compatible with our ethical, reputational, regulatory, legal, business risk appetite? It's a bit more pragmatic. It's not romantic, to your earlier point.
But it's actionable.
It's just, hey, let's not, it's actionable. Exactly. I mean, it's very actionable, I think. One thing that I think it helps you to do is, the first thing that I'll talk about with clients is, well, what's the red line? When we say not bad, what are the guardrails? What are your ethical nightmares? What are the ethical nightmares that you need to avoid? What are the ethical nightmares with regards to data collection? What are your ethical nightmares with regards to, distributing goods and services? It's going to be something around discrimination. We can define what those are, and then we can put controls in place to drastically decrease the likelihood of those things happening. It's very actionable, and it lends itself to things like, doing things like metrics, make KPIs, tracking progress, tracking compliance, quality improvement, that sort of thing.
I was talking to a guy who was on our webinar series, The Ethics Verse, and he was telling the story about how he landed after a flight in the airport, and everything was closed except for McDonald's, and he went up there to order, and basically he got a whole meal from a robot. And he was talking about how if we're not careful, this AI is going to leave a whole group of people behind. And I find that kind of an interesting argument. I hadn't really thought about it from that perspective. And what he was saying is, like, it's perhaps unethical to use this AI to sort of lead to ultimately job elimination. What we should really be more concerned about is maintaining the jobs we have and making sure people don't get left behind, so that those people can do more, so that organization can be more
Sure.
productive.
Yeah.
What do you think about that? Because I think there's some like second and third like layer assumptions and kind of arguments embedded in that position.
Yeah. It depends on the content of the we. When we say we shouldn't leave those people behind, is the we McDonald's? Is the we society at large? Is the we government? What are we? Who's the we?
Right.
I generally don't think so. Here's what I take to be a standard sort of shared view among people. Businesses don't have an ethical obligation to hire people. They don't have an ethical obligation to hire people. And then I think it's a short skip from they don't have an ethical obligation to hire people to they don't have an ethical obligation to keep people on, when they could replace them with more efficient means, when they don't need them anymore. Let's just say that, when they don't have an obligation to keep people on board when they no longer need them. I think that's probably true. I sort of thought I checked it with a couple of my friends, thought, so what do they think? And they're a disagreeable bunch. But they all agreed. I'm sure that some people disagree. Some people think businesses do have an ethical obligation to keep people on, even though they no longer have a need for them. But that's probably the exception to the rule. So let's assume, for the sake of argument, that no individual business has an obligation to hire people or to keep people on when they're no longer needed. That's just sort of not among their ethical obligations. If you're going to hire them, you have ethical obligations to treat them well, not to mistreat them, blah, 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 blah. You have an ethical obligation to not discriminate in your hiring process. But, that's distinct from whether you have an ethical obligation to hire anyone in the first place. Let's suppose, for the sake of argument, that AI results in pretty massive job loss. That wouldn't be because the companies defaulted on their obligations to hire people or keep them employed, because they don't have any, I don't think. So it strikes me as a societal problem. And then the question is this anyone's responsibility? And if so, whose? Then the answer seems to be, well, if it's anyone's responsibility, it's got to be the government's. I mean, if the government has any function at all, it's to protect people. It's to protect its citizens from, say, destitution, from economic catastrophe, which in turn massively impacts people's ability to lead lives, in some cases to survive, in other cases to lead lives worth living. So it is a shame. It's too bad when people lose their jobs. We should greet that with compassion. And then I think we have to think about, well, what do we do about this? And I think the we is going to be something like, what do we think government should do about this?
Yeah, and how do we prevent the governmental response in protection of the sort of societal impact that you're alluding to here, falling into just, you remember like the Luddites, I think they're called, that they would go and just smash the Luddites. Yeah, they just go and smash machines because those machines were sort of eliminating jobs. I mean, isn't that kind of the story with them?
Exactly. People think it was like an anti-technology thing. It was a jobs thing.
It was a jobs thing. So like, from that perspective, then perhaps the Italian response, which again, I'm not really sure how that all sorted out, perhaps that was sort of justified from a societal perspective. I get the argument for the Italian thing was more about security and all that other stuff, but like if the terminus of that was, one could at least argue that then this could lead to sort of a governmental response to say, well, we need to kind of shut this down because this is going to deteriorate and massively separate all these other people.
Yeah, I mean, that might be a good short-term solution. It's an empirical claim. Whether it would be a good long-term solution, I suspect it's not, though, because it's one government among many. Other governments will say, let 1,000 flowers bloom, go, 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 go. And
right.
They'll innovate in various ways. They'll move ahead economically speaking. The country that stopped innovating completely and stopped adopting new innovations is going to fall behind economically.
Right.
That's going to have a really bad impact on people. So probably that's not the route. I mean, I don't know. You could imagine things like government incentives to corporations to retrain and upskill people. So
okay.
Corporations might not be under any obligation, any ethical obligation to hire people or to retrain or upskill or educate them. But maybe governments give something like a tax incentive, a tax break for money spent towards reskilling or upskilling, retraining, educating employees who lost their jobs due to advancing technology, something along those lines.
Yeah, and that could sort of gently guide guys to create, by creating those incentives to help sort of prevent this, potentially inevitable negative outcome. Yeah,
I mean, I don't think it's a silver bullet. I don't even know if that's plausible, but it seems to me like that kind of thing, that in concert with, 4, 5, 6, 7, whatever other initiatives might be an effective way, might in aggregate be a way of solving for the problem as best we can. One thing I'll say that I really don't like, and this is worth raising on something called the Ethics Expert podcast, is people will say, well, it's going to create more jobs than it destroys. Now, first of all, we can be doubtful that that's the case. Maybe it is. I don't have any view on this, frankly. I think it's going to create some jobs, it's going to destroy some jobs, and I don't know how it's going to shake out. But even if you suppose that for the sake of argument, it's going to create more jobs than it destroys, that's sort of, in some ways, it's not ethically irrelevant, but it's not enough to the point. And what I mean by that is, okay, even if the numbers work out so that, the jobs created column has a bigger number than the jobs destroyed column, all those people who lost their jobs from the destroyed column, they're real people. They really lost their job. They really don't have a livelihood. They really can't pay their mortgage or their rent. They really do have kids who are depending on that income. They really do want to send their kids to college. They blah, 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 blah. So it would still be, again, even if it creates more jobs than it destroys, there's still a huge ethical toll on the population that it did hurt. And so this sort of like accounting method of seeing whether all is good jobs wise is sort of it's too cold for my taste, too ethically callous.
Well, I think the term you used, the accounting method, is an apt one because in accounting, we're talking about dollars, and dollars are fungible. But those people, to your point, who lost those jobs aren't necessarily going to be fungible for those new jobs, especially if the new jobs created are an upskilled job and there's that sort of skills gap.
Yeah, exactly. But those people might not have the resources by which they can go to night school. Maybe they can't go to night. Maybe they have kids to take care of. If they went to night school, they'd have to pay for a babysitter they don't have money for, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, but it's a nice headline.
Which is the nice headline?
That
it creates more jobs than destroys.
Yeah.
It's a nice headline.
Yeah.
It's just ethically callous.
Right.
Yeah.
So, you started working on this book over a year ago, yeah?
The book came out a year ago. I think I started writing it February of 22 when it came out in July of 22.
Okay. So much has happened.
No, that's not right.
Well, let's just say it because that sounds really impressive. We'll just go with that. Okay. You ripped a book out in 6 months. That sounds great.
Well, I did. I wrote the first draft in 4 months.
Well, that is that's actually impressive. But so much has changed since the book came out. What are you surprised at? Like, you're a philosophical guy. You're a guy who can kind of see around the curve well. What have you been surprised about since, from what's happened since your book came out in terms of like predictions that you made in it that maybe happened faster or slower, or things that you thought would have, impacts you thought would have been had that we are or aren't seeing? Like, talk to us a little bit about like how your views have maybe been affected or changed since the publication a year ago.
Okay, so I'll focus on two things. One is what's changed. I didn't really make a bunch of predictions in the book. I don't do that kind of thing. I just don't know. So I don't. And I'll say maybe this is going to happen, maybe that. But I generally stay away from predictions. The big thing that has changed, we've already mentioned. Everybody knows generative AI. That wasn't the thing when I wrote the book. I mean, I wrote it in February, and I think it was that November. I started writing the book in February, turned in the draft by May or June or something, and went back and forth with the editor. I mean, I think the book was it was done in December, like final done December. And I think I'm getting the years wrong. I'm not sure. Anyway, GPT came out afterwards. That's the main headline here. And so I didn't say anything about what you can call general purpose generative AI. So that book is really about task specific AI. So an AI that predicts the risk rating for someone defaulting on a mortgage or some other kind of loan, or for insurance premiums, or for risk that they're going to commit a crime in the next 2 years for criminal defense purposes or probation purposes, or photo recognition software, or it does a thing. What's interesting about generative AI, especially LLMs, is that you can use them for all sorts of things. You can use LLM across all industries. You can use it in healthcare. You can use it in financial services. You can use it in insurance. You can use it in whatever, automotive. And it doesn't matter, any industry. So it's across all industries. All sorts of roles can use it. And you don't necessarily have to, but in some cases you might be wise to reprogram the whole thing. It's not like a whole new AI. It's what people call a foundational model. So I didn't talk about that in that book. I think all of the issues that I talk about in that book also apply to generative AI.
100%, yep.
But then there's another set of issues that generative AI raises that I don't talk about in that book. So that's one thing. The other thing is about changing views. I take sort of relatively standard lines in that book about, say, the value of data privacy and explainability in AI and bias in AI. I don't totally think I still hold those views exactly as I did in the book. I'm still glad that I articulated it in the way that I do, because the things that I think now are a little bit more controversial, a little bit more cutting edge. And I don't think enterprise needs to trade in the controversial and cutting edge. You need to understand I think the views that are espoused in that book about the value of explainability, I think, are perfectly reasonable views to hold. I think that there are some alternative views that are also reasonable that I'm sort of trying on, so to speak. So for instance, in the book, I talk about the value of explainability from an ethical perspective, that we need to be able to explain the outputs of our AI. There's reasons for thinking that they shouldn't be black boxes. Now, I say in low risk cases, I'm fine with black boxes, but in high risk cases, black box seems like a really bad idea. I'm actually getting to come around to thinking, actually, there's probably plenty of high risk cases where a black box is acceptable on the condition that it's been sufficiently tested for being safe.
Okay.
So, for instance, and I actually do say this, I think give this example in the book, but I'm not positive. If you've got a black box model that's 99% accurate at predicting whether someone's going to develop cancer, and the best doctor is 80% accurate. I'm making up these numbers. It's a thought experiment. And you've used this black box model, or you've tested it again and again and again and again and again, and it just clearly systematically outperforms our best doctors. Use it. Who would you rather, which would you rather have your daughter diagnosed by, the 80% accurate doctor or the 99.9% AI? I think the AI. I think, because of all the testing. Now, so part of me thinks that the black box discussion is a bit overhyped, because what we really care about is reliability of outputs more than anything else. I think that's the case. There might be some exceptions, but I'm broadly inclined. I'm now broadly inclined to that view.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think we do really care about outcomes more than inputs, but to the extent, to your point, that we're confident that those outcomes are consistently quote unquote good, whatever that means. Like, I don't know
Yeah,
how a microwave works, but
But someone or other does. Someone or other does. I mean, in those cases,
Okay.
there's someone who knows how the hell this thing works.
Oh, but
Right?
you're saying
Cars-
like it's a true black box. Like no one actually knows.
The data scientists don't know. They're like,
Got
we don't
you.
know how they don't know how LLMs work. It's a black box. They've got some hypotheses, some theories. They're testing some things. They're
Isn't
trying
that
to figure it out.
nuts?
But yeah, it's nuts. It's crazy. But
But also, who cares?
you know,
Kinda? If
but-
the
but-
outcomes
but
work,
if
who cares?
But if it works, and it might not work, I mean, I think lots of a ton of safety testing needs to be done, especially if we're going to use an LLM in a healthcare setting, which is being done. But if it works really, really, really well, I might not call it intelligent or something like that. I'm loath to attribute intelligence to an LLM, but I might say it's good enough. It's close. It's functionally equivalent to being highly intelligent, and that's all we need in this case.
And why are you
Something along
loath
those
to
lines.
attribute
And-
intelligence to it?
That's a whole other conversation. I'll answer that in a second, but let me say one other thing. The other reason why I'm coming around to just, loving the black box is that the ship has sailed.
Yeah, right.
Data's only getting more complicated.
It's
We're
happening.
getting so much more data.
We're there.
And one thing that I like to talk about is the rise of quantum computing. So quantum computers are, we can talk about this if you want, but they're insanely powerful computers that can process way, way, way more data than our best supercomputers today can. It can perform calculations in mere seconds that it would take our best supercomputers to perform hundreds of years, thousands of years to do. So then we're going to get quantum AI in all likelihood, which means that it's going to be recognizing patterns across a bonkers quantity of data points. And if it works, and there's no hope of understanding what's going on inside that thing. So I just sort of think, we're just going to get black box models, and we need to test the hell out of them for being sufficiently safe in the context in which they're deployed. And that's it. That's not what I say in the book. In the book, I say there's some cases in which we definitely need explainability here, some cases. There might still be, there's always cases and cases,
Totally.
but I'm much less worked up about black boxes now than I was when I wrote the book.
Well, imagine the black box of like quantum AI. I mean, that's
Right,
a black
that's what I'm
hole
saying.
box. I mean, that's gonna be
Exactly.
massive. You know
Forget
what I
it.
mean?
No light is escaping that thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there are various technical tools to try to understand, like SHAP is a tool that data scientists will use to try to understand what's going on inside of our AI model. And it might provide some kinds of insights or others. I'm a little bit dubious of that as well, because there's an extent to which the simplification becomes a distortion of what's going on. And I think that's probably more often the case than is not. But even if you put that to the side, we're just not going to get there with quantum AI. Forget your tools. The math that it's crunching is just it's light years beyond where we are, where our own brain is capable of comprehending.
Yeah, it's crazy that we've built something. I know you're gonna hate what I'm about to say, which I'm trying to bring us back to it, but like that's like smarter than we are. So let's go back to the why you loathe the intelligence comment.
Oh, well, I mean, there's lots to say here, but the basics of it is that the way that LLMs work is that it's stringing together words in a coherent fashion, and what it's it's meant to be a coherent string of words. And when we see a bunch of words strung together in a coherent way, we read it as a conversation or the expressions of an intelligent creature, the expressions of a mind. That's not what's going on. It's just doing probability that these words, as it were, stick together in a way that I'll get a thumbs up from my programmer, so to speak, to anthropomorphize it a little bit. But it's not hooked up to reality in any way. It doesn't grasp reality, it doesn't grasp concepts. It doesn't appreciate the meanings of words. It's not a meaning thing. It's just these set of words is in the same mathematical or close mathematical space to these words in the vast corpus of words that I've analyzed, so to speak. And that's not intelligence. That's just, mathematical prediction of the next word. When you and I speak, when the next word comes out of my mouth, I'm not saying that I think, the words that I'm saying right now are not coming out because I think that they're the most probable words that will match with the words that came before. I'm saying the words that I'm saying based on the meanings of the words and how the meanings of those words connect, not how they happen to show up in text.
Yeah, it's kind of analogous to that guy tripping and spilling the paint to some degree. Like it lacks that intentionality or something.
Yeah, I mean, I think that analogy breaks down at some level because it's doing more than just spilling. But the analogy, you're right. I mean, there's something where it's it's produced something that looks like a Pollock,
Right.
but it's not. It's doing something that looks like it's produced by an intelligent creature, but it's not.
Yeah, it's super interesting.
Good callback. That was nice. That was a nice way to.
Yeah, see, we bring it all together. We bring it all together, and that's intelligence. Okay. So you also mentioned that like you had, now that generative AI, the proliferation of it was obviously not captured in the book because it came out afterwards, but you have some different thoughts and there's some different risks that have popped up on it. And so we'll probably have to dive into those next time because we are really running out of time. See, I knew this should have been a 2-hour episode, Reid. It's always always a pleasure. I have a whole list of questions we didn't even get to, but this is what I was hoping for. So, Reid,
I have an HBR article coming out sometime soon on specifically the ethical risks pertaining to generative AI. I'll send it to you.
Yeah, please do.
Maybe you want to read it?
Yeah, I'll read it, and I'll definitely make a post about it or something because, I would love to do that. Okay, so people can find you. They can find you obviously on LinkedIn, but your organization is called Virtue. You do this AI consulting.
They can go to they can go to virtueconsultants.com. We help multinationals, mostly multinationals, not exclusively, but mostly try to figure out how to design a customized AI ethical risk framework for their organization and help them implement. But that's the core of it.
And the book,
and then you can also go to reidblackman.com.
reidblackman.com, and the book is Ethical Machines, and the podcast is Ethical Machines. So if you like Reid as much as I do, hit that subscribe button, follow him everywhere, pick that book up. It's a great read, no pun intended. And man, we will see you next time, buddy.
Cool. Thanks a lot. This was great.
Awesome. Take care.